Why is it wrong to murder someone, ontologically speaking? Now, as sentient, rational beings, we know through experience, we understand through experience why it's wrong to do that. We see the consequences of those actions. And as a society, we can agree that that is not helpful behavior for our society. But is it simply that? Well, according to humanists, naturalists, atheists, they believe, yes, they believe society is that standard. We are the standard for why we ought not do certain things. But if that's the case, we're in serious trouble, and I'm gonna tell you why. In this video, Jeff Durbin and James White deal with this very issue as they debate a humanist atheist, and they probe deep into the crevices of their worldview and I dissect it apart. And it's really easy work. So check this video out and I'm gonna give my thoughts on it.
Please do. He says there's no ultimate foundation for ethics given your worldview.
Yes.
No ultimate meaning in life and no free will for humans either. You say that it needs to be meaningful to us. It's at least meaningful to us. Was it meaningful to the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway? Was his determination of what was meaningful for him just as valuable or meaningful as your perspective that he was wrong?
Meaningful is different than defensible. I work with murderers and all the time. I have a least favorite pedophile.
Are they wrong?
He's very annoying. Yes.
They're absolutely wrong.
They are absolutely wrong. Or they are technically intersubjectively wrong.
So they're not absolutely wrong?
No, because it's all a conversation.
So the debate's over, friends.
Notice the contradictions right away. He says they're absolutely wrong, and then he changes his mind and says they're not absolutely wrong. He says they're intersubjectively wrong. Intersubjectivity is just to say that society as a collective has decided what is right and wrong. So society makes right. That is a logical fallacy. The majority doesn't make something true, doesn't make something right. What if the society says slavery is right? Is it thus right? If the conversation is leaning in that direction, is it therefore right? Come on, like this makes no sense.
They are intersubjectively wrong.
So you admit, Mr. Anderson, that they are not absolutely wrong. The Green River Killer is not absolutely wrong. Ted Bundy is not absolutely wrong. Child is not absolutely wrong. And you came to debate that your worldview provides a foundation for ethics?
Yes, the humanist perspective does provide a foundation for ethics because, again, is wrong, murder is wrong, according to the cultural conversation that we are all of which a part.
So if a society draws a circle around themselves and says that you can kill and cannibalize other human beings, as long as they're a large enough society that draws a circle around themselves and they determine that it's right to eat other humans?
Some cultures have believed that, yes, and they are part of the conversation.
Is that ethical?
Depends on the context.
So killing and cannibalizing other human beings could be ethical in your system.
If you're frozen after a plane crash and are soccer players, perhaps.
I think you missed it, Mr. Anderson. I'll say it again. Killing and cannibalizing another human being could be ethical so long as you have enough people that agree with you.
Right away, Jeff Durbin points out the moral bankruptcy of the humanist atheist worldview, a worldview without God. Mankind is ultimately the deciding factor. If they agree, as he stated, cannibalism is okay, then who's to say it's not? The guy said context matters, but then he goes to a scenario where the person is already deceased, frozen.
If you're frozen after a plane crash and are soccer players, perhaps.
I think you missed.
That's not the same. That's not killing. The person is already deceased. So he is backtracking and abandoning his own worldview because there's no justification for killing. But in his worldview, there is. If there is no ontological standard to reference what's right and wrong, there is no objective right or wrong, and he knows it.
That's not what would make it ethical. It would not be the agreement. It would be the conversation and the navigation and the negotiation. So, for example, a mercy killing would be an example of ethical killing. Because again, the best version of that person would agree. In my ethics class in divinity school, I argue that the second best version of serial killers want to be killed. So that's a common ground that you and I have.
So, Mr. Anderson, given what you've just said, why ought we to love our neighbors rather than eat them?
because that is what they prefer. And that is part of the cultural conversation. And yes, all of these groups should be part of the conversation. And I think we should be horrified by what Mao and Stalin and Pol Pot have
But you've
done.
already admitted, Mr. Anderson, that there's no absolute above Mao or Stalin or Pol Pot. So
No,
why should we be, let me finish the question. Sir.
Yes.
Why should we be horrified when there is no absolute standard to hold them to? You've already agreed that if they decide as a culture and community that what they did was right, morally right, then they're right in your system. And there's no complaint.
Because the victims would not agree. And the victims also have a say. That's not what would make it ethical. It would not be the agreement. It would be the conversation and the navigation and the negotiation.
The victims, you believe, are descendants of bacteria.
Yep.
So notice what he says. The victims, their opinion matters. So in this worldview, the conversation is the collective, the intersubjective conversations is what determines right and wrong. So the majority of people, so obviously there's going to be a majority of victims than there are villains. They can say that's wrong. In this worldview, it allows for the opposite. So if there's a majority of villains and a minority of victims, in his worldview, the villains could decide what's right and wrong. And if they want to torture and kill the majority, they're going to win out. They have more of a say-so. Because if there's no standard outside of humans, we're the deciding factors for morality. And that is absurd because we know there are universal objective truths that are true irrespective of whether humans agree or not.
Your side had made the indication at one point, it was said that the Greeks gave us this great civilization. Let me point out that Alexander the Great not only enslaved millions of people, but in his battles in basically conquering the known world at that time, killed millions of people as well. And so by what standard do you say that the Greeks gave us a great civilization, and at the same time say, yeah, except they also enslaved millions of people and killed millions of people in the process? Is there anything outside of what you call a conversation whereby someone like Alexander the Great can actually be judged?
No, the conversation is the standard. If Alexander the Great were to completely rule the world and control everything, he would, and his descendants and his dominion would determine what was right and wrong according to their worldview. Alexander would be God. He would be the person deciding and disseminating what's right and wrong to all of the other people. The conversation is standard. People are the standard. There is no standard outside of humanity to judge Alexander the Great and his actions, his sin. This is a bankrupt worldview. But listen to this horrible response.
Is there anything outside of what you call a conversation whereby someone like Alexander the Great can actually be judged?
I guess it's directed toward me. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so it's directed toward me, so let me respond. You are making a caricature of our statements, so you have to listen to us carefully, please. I talked about Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics. I named them. I did not mention Alexander the Great. Of course, he can show us other things too besides killing that we can emulate, his valor, his courage, and all that. But at the same time, I did not talk about him. I said that the Western ideas of justice, civilization, those ancient ideas, our traditional ideas are based on those ancient ideas that we find in Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics. I brought that in, and they did not have Christian God at that time, So that's what I wanted to say. So therefore, what you are saying is not quite right to put that on me. And also, secondly, well, I can stop there, of course. And then I can go on other things,
Even his response, he appeals to Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, people. So if people are the standard, then there is no absolute right or wrong because it's just their opinion versus someone else's opinion. And if there's majority opinions agree or align, according to them, that is what's right. So God forbid those opinions align for something nefarious or malicious. If the wrong person gets in power and controls the world, then that is right according to their worldview. They can't say anything is absolutely wrong. And that, my friends, is why we know there is a God, because we do not live like that. We know there is a standard outside of us. We know There are certain things that are universally, objectively wrong, no matter what, for whoever in any situation that is absolutely wrong. And that, my friends, does not come from a conversation. That is not a person's opinion. That is an ontological reality. That is a fact of reality. Only God can provide that universal truth to humankind, to us. We reference it, we know it instinctively in our consciences. But of course, the next question is, well, how do you know it's the Christian God? 2 words, Jesus Christ, empty tomb. That's how we know. He is the way, the truth, the life. No one can come to the Father except through him. Jesus Christ is the truth. So he is the person that we need to follow and obey. Jeff Durbin and James White utterly destroyed these dudes, and I pray that whoever was watching this debate and whoever was at the debate heard the truth, recognized the irrationality and absurdity of that worldview, and they were able to glean truth and seek the Lord and ultimately be saved through the preaching of the gospel and the truth of God's word. If you enjoyed this video and you want more content like this, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Like this video. I'll be back next week with another one. This is Pastor Frederick. This is By the Book. Peace.